Hello and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Hope everyone is doing well. Today I have 5 Reddit stories for you guys. All credit goes to the original posters of these stories, and I will link them in the description box. Okay, first one is called Mr. Charlie. Grandma was dead 3 days before they found her. It wasn't the stench of the corpse that tipped anyone off. Her house doesn't sit too close to others in the neighborhood. It was Mr. Charlie, her pet parakeet, that sounded the alarm. A jogger was taking a shortcut through an alleyway to reach the park just beyond her fence line when she paused, tied her shoe, and heard a faint cry for help. To think something so insignificant could cause ripples for weeks to come. I wasn't there when the EMT took her out, but from what I heard, most of the body had succumbed to decay. The skin had started to melt away from the bone due to lack of embalming. The family chose to do a closed casket ceremony, and I was designated as babysitter for the bird. Mr. Charlie looked like he hadn't eaten in days when I retrieved him. His feathers were ruffled and dirty, his talons encased with poop and food. He was likely stressed over the loss of his owner, I thought. My mom told me that Mr. Charlie was my grandmother's favorite pet in all the years she'd been here. Supposedly, he could say over 300 words and phrases. How long do I have to keep him? I don't mind, but my landlord might, I told Mom. At least until Sunday, please. I have to make arrangements with the funeral home and the lawyer regarding her will. Sunday was only 4 days away, so I figured a squawk box wouldn't be that big of a deal for such a short period of time. And since the poor little guy had been responsible for trying to get Grandma some help, I figured I should clean him up as a token of thanks. Step up, I urged the tiny bird as I poked my finger in his cage. His pupils were dilated. He didn't look eager to comply. Step up, I said again, getting a little closer. I worried maybe he might bite me, but finally Mr. Charlie obliged and hopped onto my index finger. Good bird, I cooed. He made no reply. Was he scared? Shy? As I cleaned him, I whistled and hummed, trying to calm him to his new surroundings. I had my phone out as well and looked up what exactly his species was known for. It took a minute or two for me to narrow down that, and guessed by his green pigment and size, knew as a species commonly called Lionolted or Catherine. According to the article I found, they were often quiet and good for apartments. Said to only live 10 to 15 years, they are easily trainable. I wonder how long Grandma had you, I muttered. It took him back to his cage. Charlie didn't wager, I guess, but he did seem happy to be clean. In fact, for the next 2 days of his stay, the bird said nothing. It was almost as though he were stoic or grieving over the loss of his owner. I wondered if such a pattern would get worse if he moved again, and to be honest, I had grown attached to the little fella, especially when my girlfriend stopped by to chat with him and he finally became animated. He's so cute, Darcy said excitedly as she offered him pellets. He even made a few chirps, and that perked her right up. So that Sunday I told Mom he could stay. My landlord didn't seem to mind since he was quiet and not a messy pet. And it also gave me an excuse to have Darcy over more often. She was apparently head over heels into learning how to care for him and wanted to do everything herself. Charlie didn't seem to mind, at least not at first. Then one breezy afternoon, when Darcy came in the door and dropped her keys on my kitchen counter, out of nowhere he squawked, turn around, leave." "Hey, are you not happy to see me?" Darcy muttered. "You're just a slut," Mr. Charlie answered. My girlfriend had a face of pure disbelief and spun around to accuse me. "What's the meaning of this?" she asked. I don't know. He never even talked before," I admitted. "Liars go to hell," the parakeet said. It sounded like a woman's voice now. It was old and ancient and gave me a bit of a chill. "Yeah, right. So this is some sort of prank?" Darcy asked. "You're gonna be sorry," the creepy voice said again, and Mr. Charlie hopped closer. "I hate you." That sounded exactly like me. And that was the straw that broke Darcy. You know what? You and your pet can fuck yourself. I'm going to go party with friends, she exclaimed. I tried to talk her out of it, but I had no idea why the bird had even changed his behavior that day. For the next 6 hours, I tried to text and apologize to Darcy, make things right. It went either straight to her inbox or she ignored it completely. It made me frustrated, and I said some things I probably shouldn't have. I just wanted to talk to her. When I had given up all hope, a call came in. Darcy, look, I just want to say... Is this Andrew Mitchell? It sounded like a man. Yes, who's this? Officer Retland. I'm sorry to have to be the one to tell you this. What he said after that was meaningless. I knew what had happened. I grabbed my keys and drove to the scene of the accident. They wanted me to identify the body. Something had come between Darcy's car and her next turn, and she had swerved to avoid it, ultimately landing in a ditch with her skull smashed into the windshield. That's her, I muttered as I realized her friends hadn't survived the crash either. The police let me gather her things, including her cell. Listening to the messages was chilling. It was deja vu. A play-by-play of what Mr. Charlie had recited only hours earlier. Her girlfriends had been doing a FaceTime and distracting her right before the crash. They were teasing her, calling her a slut, as my calls kept coming in. You should turn around and leave. Go back to him, one girl urged. Then Darcy listened to the last message I sent, the one where I said I was done and I hated her. It was the last thing she heard before her life ended. My throat felt dry, my body numb. Somehow, the parakeet had known. I stepped back into my apartment. I looked toward the birdcage. He was just sitting there quietly observing me. I pulled up a chair and rested my hand on my chin as I stared back. How is this possible? I muttered. He said nothing in response. My mind filled with possibilities. Had the bird predicted that Darcy would die? If so, how? Had it been the same with my grandma? I sighed after waiting for far too long for something to happen. This is crazy. I must be crazy. Grabbing my coat, I went toward the back room to watch the game. The best people often are, a voice said as I got halfway down the hall. I turned and looked at the bird. Don't be frightened, it said as I crept closer. What is this, some sort of trick? It cocked its head at me and hopped closer. Trick or treat. I sighed again. This had to be some response my grandma had taught him. Fine, don't tell me your secrets. Would you like to know a secret, Andrew? It squawked back. My jaw must have dropped. Tell me, I whispered. I see the dead, it whispered in a sing-along voice. Want to hear another secret? I leaned closer. It was barely talking. Pressing its beak right against my ear, the parakeet proclaimed, You're next. I was driving and got transported to another place. So I went to pick up food from a restaurant at the mall. I've been to this restaurant a ton of times. I got back to my car after picking up my food, put my GPS on, and started driving my usual route. There's this loop on the way to my boyfriend's house that I have to take on the highway that I always remember because it's a little tricky to merge back onto the highway. I took this loop and headed to the direction of my boyfriend's house, which I am used to. I blanked out for a second, looked down at my GPS because I didn't recognize where I was, and I noticed there's a turnaround coming up on my GPS. I looked up and I realized I'm approaching the light where I turn left to go to the mall restaurant. I was so confused because there's no way I could have gotten off the highway after that loop and go back in the direction of the mall. I looked at my GPS just to double check if I accidentally put in another address because maybe I was in car hypnosis and ended up looking at my GPS and going the wrong way. But no, it was directing me to my boyfriend's house. I always put my GPS on out of habit, even when I know where I'm going, just to keep up with delays, etc. I was so confused and shaken up by this because I have no remembrance between getting off the loop and merging, and then ending up back near the mall. I am still so confused about how this happened. Also, yesterday I was driving with my boyfriend, and there was a tow truck transporting a small truck. I looked in the small truck and saw a man in it, and glowing lights, like he had neon lights in his car or a bright radio displaying or something. I immediately pointed out to my boyfriend because I thought it was funny that a guy was just chilling in his truck while getting towed. I speed up and get near it so my boyfriend can see, and surprise, surprise, nobody was in the car. What's happening? Anyone here have a similar experience? Did I make a mistake befriending him? I recently started a new job at a jewelry store. It's been a month and I really like it here. I even made a friend. His name is Matthew and we share a shift every Monday, Thursday, and Friday. Matthew is in his mid-20s and is a pretty nice guy with his likes and hobbies. Only thing is, he never eats. I've never seen him eat on break, unlike everyone else. At first it weirded me out, but I guess everyone has their habits. There are times where he'll excuse himself to go to the bathroom and stay there for 20 to 30 minutes. Whenever he's questioned about it, he simply brushes it off. Another thing I've noticed is that sometimes his eyes go completely black and his skin will become extremely pale. I've seen this happen 2 to 3 times now and it completely freaked me out. The third time I saw it, I questioned it, but he laughed and said that I have an incredible imagination. Nonetheless, we get along well. Well, he recently invited me to have dinner at his house. I obviously accepted it and was really looking forward to it. A day before his dinner, a coworker went missing. Her name was Amanda. The last one who saw her was Matthew, but even he didn't know what had happened. Yesterday was the dinner. I went to his house. He lives in this 4-story apartment building on the 2nd floor. The place was lovely, if you exclude the awful smell that emitted from a room with a slightly open door. We chatted while eating, sharing stories and experiences. I excused myself to go to the bathroom. He was hesitant at first, but eventually he showed me the way to the bathroom. I passed the room with the awful smell and peeked out of curiosity into it. I had to hold myself as I saw Amanda's body just laying on the floor with a few parts missing. I rushed to the bathroom and slightly cried. I was so shocked I couldn't do anything else. After I was done, I made my way back to the kitchen. Halfway there, I saw a glimpse of something I can't even begin to describe. It was a humanoid thing with pale skin and black soulless eyes. Accompanying it was a set of huge black wings, and it looked as if it was feasting on a leg. As soon as it felt my presence, I assume, it transformed back to Matthew. He innocently smiled at me before asking me if I wanted dessert. I immediately declined and collected my things before running for the door. Before I could open the door, he, or it, was back in the previous form. It grabbed me by my shoulders and yelled at me to let nobody know of this or else I was next. Needless to say, I ran as fast as I could. Today is Friday, and it showed up at the store like normal and greeted to me as if the events of yesterday never occurred. I want to say something, but what if I end up like Amanda? What if I end up becoming his next meal? I got high at a drug lord's house. A few years ago, a friend of mine asked me and my cousin to go to a friend's summer home for a weekend. It was my last summer before college, so we were all excited. For context, we didn't know anyone else that was going, but in my country, this is not so weird. We often get together different groups of friends. So we got there and it was this huge land. It had a whole sort of park with a little built-in river and bridge. It had a horse ring, but with bleachers. I don't know how to explain it. Anyway, it had 2 pools and a really humongous house. We were staying in the pool house, and there was also this room where they had a deer, like alive. And that room alone was bigger than my apartment. So my cousin and I, both girls, started getting weirded out, but still young and very irresponsible, decided to stay. Plus, we had been driven there, so we had no way to get back to the city. So the first night, it's super fun. We had a great time, went to sleep, everything was just fine. Next day, a friend of my friend offers us LSD, and again being super stupid, we said yes, which made my cousin angry, and she stopped talking to us for the rest of the day. She didn't take LSD. My friend and I are having a good time laughing by the pool when suddenly 3 cars appear, one being kind of escorted a sort of Hummer truck. So a few men get out of the cars and we know we're fucked because every single one of them had either machetes or some sort of gun. So I told my friend to just keep quiet and to not look at them. But they walked directly to my cousin, who was hanging a few meters from us. At some point, my cousin stands up and starts walking towards me, mouthing me to help her. So I noticed the guys were walking a few steps behind her. We sort of ran into our room and locked ourselves into the bathroom. The room had no lock, so they started knocking on the bathroom door. We were all scared. I'm high on LSD, so I'm not sure if this is actually happening. But my cousin tells me we need to make a plan to get out or they will break the door. We hear them yelling to open up, that they want to talk, and they are banging the door. At some point we open it and this guy comes in. I got stuck between the door and the wall, so my cousin and friend get out and I got stuck inside with the guy. I noticed he had blood on his nose, and so I told him, I don't know why I did that. This guy was twice my size. He had a gun on him. So while he cleans his nose, I go into the bedroom where I find my cousin and friend sitting on the bed, while about 5 guys were surrounding them and one was blocking the door. Mind you, they still were holding the machetes and or guns. So I sat on the bed and the man with the bloody nose comes up to us and tells us he just wants us to go to his daughter's quinceañera, and there's this really nice party with food and music and all that stuff, and that he doesn't understand why we won't go or why we got scared and ran. He swears we'll have fun and he'll bring us back whenever we want. At this point, he looks at me and tries to explain that my cousin won't go with him and that it's fine if we don't have formal dress to go. So I tell him the only thing I could come up with. I said, look, thing is, we took LSD and are really high. You got us all scared with the banging and screaming and guns, and we just want to stay here because we feel safe here. So he asked me if my cousin could go alone since she didn't take anything, to which I said no because I'm really freaked out and need her to calm down. The guy kind of laughed, got up and said it was fine, that we could call him if we changed our minds, and apologized for running after us and the whole yelling thing. And shortly after, they got into the cars and left. A year later, my friend tells me she just learned that the house belonged to a cartel in my country, and that the guy we met was kind of a big deal there. She gave me the nickname he goes by, but for everyone's sake, I won't say it. Anyway, guy with the bloody nose and gun, please let's not meet. Ever, ever, ever. Esme approached the door. All around her, she heard them. They scuffled around her, not giving notice to her presence. She barely held back her sigh of relief. Just a few more steps, a few more horrible steps, and she'd be free. The door was right there. She was so close. The first rays of light shone through the windows. Snarls erupted from her side, and only fast reflexes managed to save her from suffering her parents' fates. Horrified, she scampered to the nearest wall, ripping apart the papery disguise to reveal the doorways. All around her, footsteps moved in rapid succession. Triumphant growls turned into angered screeches as she pushed the door open. A taloned hand had made its way through, and only her satisfaction of being alive kept her from screaming aloud. Crawling through the walls, she stifled her sobs. Spots of color still hindered her vision, a direct result of the light in her eyes. She could barely conceal her gasp as her arms gave way, sending her tumbling to the floor. For a few moments she was fine, and then the pain struck, spreading like cracks of fragile glass. Her elbow ached at an intensity that almost sent her over the edge. Frustration welled up inside her. Tears threatened to drown her in sorrow as she beat her tiny fists onto the watery floor. It had been days since they'd first come. Days since everything she'd known had been turned upside down and inside out. She could still remember them, her parents, how they screamed when the creatures came, how they've cut up into shreds. Vividly she relived the memories, how their eyes rolled towards her, how the animals had tied them with their own tendons, as if they were some twisted versions of a Christmas present. She wanted to scream, but she held her tongue. She couldn't give up. She'd try again, and again, and again. She would never stop trying. Never. With that in mind, she walked forward, only the drip of tears as her company. Thank you for listening. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing and liking my channel, and I will see you on the next one.